Absolutely.
Hello,
But
Philip. Thank you for coming to the podcast today. Very excited to have you here. Today, it would be next 25 to 30 minutes. We will be focusing on your journey. How did you basically come to the North America? What your family background is? How did you start your career, your education, all that good stuff. And it will be natural conversation. We'll flow and
sure,
go as deep as we like, and it will continue to go forward. So before we further, ado, let's get started. So Philip, if you can help us understand like your family background, where do you belong
sure.
from? You can start from that. Go ahead.
All right. So I was born in 1954, yeah, a little while ago, in
Nice.
France. That was a really post-World War II reconstruction.
Right.
I was born in a very poor family,
Mm-hmm.
with
Nice.
really nothing. I mean, actually, my family was going from town to town for a while, and then we settled in Normandy.
Right.
And they were always very keen on me getting an education
Mm-hmm.
because they really didn't have that opportunity
Right.
for various circumstances. So I was like, you need to learn, you need to go to school, you need to do all those things.
Right.
And I
One.
was very interested in,
Yeah. Just one question here. So, can you talk a little bit about your like parents? Like, were they mainly farmers, or were they
no,
like what were they doing actually?
my mother was a paralegal,
Uh-huh.
and my father was a door-to-door salesperson.
Nice. Nice. Okay.
Okay.
Got it.
And so, I mean, and at that time, those two professions were not, they didn't provide such an income that you could aspire to,
Right.
uh, you know, a lot of different things. I don't think we had a car until I was 7 or something
Right.
like this.
Right.
So, and the thing I was going to say is that the thing for me, school
Mm-hmm.
was an escape,
Okay.
because
Sense.
at work, I had a brother and a sister,
Mm-hmm.
and when you live in a poor neighborhood, and
Mm-hmm.
you need someone who was like me, relatively rebellious, and
Right.
I just and school was a fantastic escape. I could learn about all kinds of different things, and the world was really interesting and fascinating.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed going to school.
So what school did you go to? Like what do you study?
Okay, well, I went to, elementary school, secondary school. I went to, all the, I I was able to study Latin and Greek for some reason
Right.
that I don't want to go into this. Then science, chemistry, and mathematics.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went to university,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was able to apply for a spot in a school of engineering in France.
Nice. So
And
you
I
did after the university, like in your master's you
yes,
for engineering?
yeah,
Okay.
I got a master's, and then I went to school of engineering. They're called grandes écoles in France. I mean, this is kind of
Okay.
very elitist type school. You have to go through a contest, really a nationwide contest. They
Yeah.
term they actually recruit 1.25% of all students.
To apply. Okay.
You apply,
Pretty
and
hard.
the one thing that's I find extraordinary is that it was free. I
Oh,
went through my entire scholarship, and the state paid for it.
right.
I mean, if you think about what's going on in the U.S. These days, and in different other countries. I mean, I live in Canada. It's not
Yeah.
as bad as in the U.S., but it's still, you have to pay thousands of dollars to get an education. I paid nothing.
Right,
I
right.
had the best, one of the best education in the world for
Hmm.
free.
So one question is it because you were like smart and you got a scholarship, or is it free for
No, no,
everyone in France?
it was free for everybody.
Everyone. Okay.
You know, the state pays for, I mean, in France, and certainly at the time, the state paid for your health care and your
Hmm.
education. And
Nice.
so I benefited from this because I went through my entire scholarship. I mean, it probably was some registration fees that were like
Mm.
$10 or something like this. I mean, it's
Right.
a very
Right.
insignificant amount. But
Yeah.
can you imagine that, you know, someone like me from a nothing background, you
Yeah.
know,
Was
who
it
could go through those schools
right?
and university, school of engineering, and you pay nothing.
Oh, that's like awesome, actually. What do you, was there an area of specialization for you in engineering?
So I had a um, let's say a bachelor's degrees in physics and chemistry,
Hmm.
then a master's in um, systems automation, you know,
Okay.
electronics and systems automation,
Right.
and my engineering degrees in electronics,
Oh, wow. Okay. That's
basically.
good. So we are talking about like what, 1970s? Is that's when you did that?
Yeah. Yeah, I graduated from the School of Engineering in 1977.
Oh, okay. That's
So
good.
it's you know, a few years ago.
Right, right, right. Awesome. So what made you to come to like the US? What did you work there in
Okay.
Toronto? Yeah.
So I had to go through a military service because this
Oh,
was mandatory, you know, in
right.
France at the time. And then I had a, you know, temporary job in my native town. And
Hmm.
then I was recruited out of nowhere by the French Atomic Energy Commission
Oh, okay.
to work on a very specific project in medical imaging
Hmm.
in the area of positron emission tomography.
Wow.
So if you go back in 1980, you know,
Hmm.
if you look at positron emission tomography, there
Hmm.
were 10 to 15 centers in the world
Oh,
working
okay.
on this. And
Right.
I had been chosen to work in one of those centers,
That's
which
awesome.
was kind of amazing. I mean, I had to move to Paris. It was really interesting.
Hmm.
And I stayed at this lab for 3.5 years
Right.
until the biggest lab in the world in that area that was in Los Angeles at UCLA,
Right.
they called me and they
Ah,
said, well, you know, we've heard about you. And of course, because, you know, there's 15 centers in the world, there's 15 people doing my job in the
right.
world. So
Right.
they called me and said, hey, what about coming to Los Angeles? And going to America had always been a dream of mine.
Oh,
So
wow.
I packed up and left. And, you know, on July 5th, 1983, I landed in Los Angeles.
Oh, that's awesome. So just a quick question here. So I know in France they use nuclear to build a lot of power in France. I think maybe
Sure.
50% France is nuclear power operated, I
Yeah,
guess.
of course. Yeah.
Was the imaging that you were doing was to detect any kind of harmful effects on people of
I
nuclear or
know. I mean, nuclear medicine is one area of medical imaging where you use radionuclides to detect diseases.
Mhm.
Positron emission tomography is different because you're really measuring physiological phenomenon, you know, physiological quantities like blood flow or oxygen intake in the brain
Mm.
or glucose intake in the brain.
Oh, okay.
So, for instance, if someone has a stroke,
Hmm.
you know, in the brain,
Yeah.
well, the infarcted region will cease to be will cease to receive blood, okay, because that's what happens. And so
Right,
you don't have oxygen consumption, you don't have glucose consumption. On an X-ray image, you will not see that.
right.
On a PET image, you will see that there is a region of the brain
Hmm.
that doesn't receive blood.
Oh,
And so you can do all kinds of measurements and you can follow patients who did all kinds of studies on also on the absorption of neuroleptics in the
right,
brain.
right, right,
So it
right.
was right today, if you go in just about any big hospital, they have a PET machine.
Is it same as like there is this CAT scan also that happens, and I know a lot of
Yeah.
people who have cholesterol in their veins in the heart. They can detect like calcium deposits through the CAT scan because it will show the
No.
deposit. Can this
But
also be for that or?
well, a CAT scan really it measures density.
Mhm.
Okay, density of tissue and bones and whatever. An MRI is going to measure the density of protons.
Right,
Okay, so they're very physical measurements. We measure physiological um, quantities, like
right,
what is the blood flow, at that point in
right,
your brain.
right, right, right.
And so it's complementary. Today, you see that you have machines that do cat and pet at the same time. I mean,
Mm,
anyway, it's just like a
nice.
fascinating area of medical imaging that I was involved in for a long time.
So one question that comes to my mind is that while you were working in Paris for 3.5 years, were
Hmm.
you connected with your family, like parents and brother and sisters, or they were still in
Sure.
Normandy at home, or how was it?
I would go every so often. I would move back to Normandy to spend a weekend.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And the thing is that I left Normandy, went to Paris. I was very busy
Mm-hmm.
with all the work that I had to do.
Right.
It was kind of the first time that I lived on my own, to be honest with you.
Right.
So it was
Right.
like, yeah, sure, I'm going to enjoy that for a while, and then I decided to move to the U.S., which was it's people don't realize how big a decision
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
make
Absolutely. Absolutely.
because I left. I had a girlfriend, and she decided not to come with me.
Yeah.
I had sold everything that I had.
Right.
I basically landed in Los Angeles with two suitcases and $2,500. That was it,
Right.
and
Right.
a job.
Yeah. And that's a big relief, right? So
Yeah,
if
yeah. I mean, that you have a job. So,
yeah, that's a good word actually. So, I mean, can you contrast like so I know like Paris is a city with a lot of architecture and character, and a
hmm
lot of people flock for visiting Paris as the like fashion as well as like it is near to Milan, not very
so,
far away, plus tourism and whatever, right? And now you come to Los Angeles, it's Hollywood,
hmm
wild, wild west and whatnot. Like how do you contrast your living in France versus now coming to LA?
okay. But that's a really interesting question. So, first of all, I believe Paris is the most beautiful city in the world.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, there's no question. That being said, living in Paris is very difficult, and
Oh,
certainly was even more difficult when I remember at the time because there were a lot of strikes
hmm,
and the bureaucracy, and it was kind of for someone like I said, I'm someone who is relatively rebellious.
hmm,
I want to do all kinds of things, and I was working for a government agency that is somewhat secretive, because it has to do with atomic energy.
yeah.
Um, there's a hierarchy of the boss and the underboss and this and that, and it's just like it was not necessarily something that I felt comfortable with. Although living in Paris is tremendous.
Mm-hmm.
As a young, I think I was 27 or 28 or something like that. You have a city that is so beautiful and so
Yeah.
full of things to discover and things to do. But at the same time, I had always been fascinated by the US, the wild, wild West and California. I was like, oh my God. So
Yeah.
I took a plane, it
Yeah.
took, I mean, it literally took me from Paris to Los Angeles, and I landed in Los Angeles, and I decided to kind of zero out my life, meaning this is it.
And yeah.
I made that decision.
Right.
I'm here. I better make the most of it.
That makes sense.
And I remember the first 6 months of my stay in Los Angeles. I didn't have a car, which kind of crazy in Los Angeles not have a car. I don't know. It's very difficult. But I lived not that far away from UCLA, and I would take the bus, and every day I was, I'm in Los Angeles. This is amazing, and I've never regretted it. And Los Angeles is my favorite city in the world.
Right. Now
I
after
went back.
or before Paris? Like, is it now top or after Paris?
It's Los Angeles is my favorite city in the entire universe.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
That answers it.
I went back last year, and this is something that I should share with you.
Mm-hmm.
I miss Los Angeles so much that I decided I had to go back for a week
Right.
just to
Experience.
be there, to experience and to be on the freeways, which is kind of crazy.
Right. Right.
I
So
want to
if,
drive on the
right.
freeways.
So if I were to, attribute, is it the open culture that you liked
Yeah.
in LA? Is it the weather that you liked in the LA? Is it the hustle bustle, the too many people, like variety of Hollywood and people and all that free spirit of California you liked? What was those attributes or one thing or two things that you can say stand out that
You
made it
know,
like a favorite for you?
so I mean, it's difficult to beat the weather in Los
Yeah,
Angeles, obviously.
absolutely.
It's certainly one area where you can live outdoors every
Yeah,
day,
and beach
even,
is also very beautiful as well.
it's just like,
Santa
but
Monica
I
or
think for me was to express that, first of all, that city,
Mhm.
um, and all the people that I met then and who welcomed me gave
Mhm.
me a tremendous opportunity.
Yeah,
Okay, I was uprooted from France, sent to Los Angeles,
right,
and I rebuilt my life from then.
right,
But
right.
I like the craziness of that town. I'm not into too much into Hollywood and stuff like this, but just the sheer size of the city, all the
Mhm.
things that you can discover in one day, all the things that you can do in one day. Um,
Yeah.
the free spirit, the
Mhm.
kind of, we can do everything we want. Yeah, and I tell you, I landed, uh, like I said, on July 5th, 1983.
Yeah.
And
Just
when
after
I
Wednesday.
I got out of the airport and said, "This is home."
Yeah, absolutely. And your date also is very interesting because 4th of July is the Independence Day and 5th of July is what you're landing. So there must be some festive things going on. Probably you might have
Well,
seen.
I mean, the thing I didn't want, because I know, some of the people that I was going to work with were going to greet me at the airport, and so I didn't want to disrupt their Fourth of July plan.
Yeah.
So I said, "Well, okay, let's them have their celebration, then I'll come on the 5th."
Right, right. That makes sense. So, I mean, 1980s was a very interesting time for the US. So, like with the Vietnam War, people coming back in 60s and 70s, that was a hippie
Mhm.
era that happened in the US, especially on the West Coast, right? A lot of people were into drugs and marijuana and things like that. and there were a lot of after effects of it even till like 80s. And you also had a lot of renaissance in the US, especially the West Coast, especially in LA area, around people doing yoga, yogic meditation, spirituality.
Yeah,
Did you experience
yeah.
of it?
I was too busy with the project that I was involved in. I mean, certainly I realized that California was a health-oriented state. Okay, like people running and healthy food and
Yeah,
all that stuff. I was not too much involved with the yoga thing
yeah,
because I was working so hard, on the project I had been hired to
yeah,
work on. Although, UCLA is a fantastic campus.
yeah.
And so we played tennis and, doing all these things, but yoga was not necessarily what I was
Right.
much into.
Inclined towards. So this brings me to a good, segue. So when you came to UCLA, were you part of like an administration in UCLA? Were you like a scientist? Were you doing like a postdoc, a professor? Like, were you doing a PhD? What were you
No,
doing?
I was hired as an engineer.
Engineer. Okay. In
Yeah,
the lab.
because so I can't remember exactly the exact position, to be
Mhm.
honest with you.
Right.
But my job, we had a big project, a joint venture with a
Hmm.
company in Tennessee, and I was working on that joint venture as an engineer. I was actually the lead engineer on all the imaging software.
Oh, okay. That's good. That's good. Did you write software yourself, or you were mostly directing others
Oh
and they?
yeah, yeah, yeah. No. I wrote hundreds of thousands of lines of code during my life.
Got it. So your language of choice at that time was what, like Fortran or like COBOL, or what did you write in?
Well, I wrote because I was a systems engineer. I wrote a lot of assembly code.
Assembly code. Okay, directly.
Okay,
Okay.
then Fortran, then um, what else? Well, we had a whole bunch of things.
C,
SQL.
SQL.
Well,
Yeah.
C. Well, because I was trying to build not only this imaging system, but the infrastructure around it. So we were one of the first Oracle users,
Hmm.
and
Right.
we built a configuration management software on Oracle. We were one of the first Ethernet users,
Nice.
and we built a distributed image processing system on Ethernet.
Wow. Okay.
Uh,
That's
I
all.
was very interested in artificial intelligence, so I wrote programs, more for myself than anything else in Prolog and
Prolog. Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
awesome.
Prolog. Yeah, it was a big. I mean, not a whole lot of people remember Prolog.
No, I know absolutely what you're talking about. Prolog, I know, like a Lisp, Prolog, etc. were early
Yeah,
AI languages that people were using. Of course, I have never used it, but I
yeah. I
know.
mean, like I said, it's just but and then later on, I became really fascinated with Ada,
Hmm.
and I actually became one of the, really one of the world specialists in real-time Ada. So how do you structure the real-time system that is going to support the Ada language? And I did this for NASA.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, once I left UCLA, I found another job in San Diego with an
Right.
institution called the California Space Institute,
Uh-huh. Okay.
and I did remote sensing, so studies, in remote sensing, which were, you know, somewhat not similar, but on the same vein of what I had done in medical imaging. But I also was very much involved in automations, robotics, and real-time ADA
Right. Right.
for the
Ada.
space station, actually.
Yeah. No. 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 This is very good. So I have this question. So you came from France all the way to the US, and you
Hmm.
came to initially work in the University of Southern California, and then
Yeah.
you went to work for NASA. These are all kind of government agencies, etc. But you were like a French national, right? Like, how did they even allow you to like do this kind of job?
Well, number one, I came in the US to an H1 visa,
Yeah, yeah.
and then I became a US citizen in 1993.
Oh, okay, got it.
So I'm a US citizen.
Right,
I mean, then I went through the whole process of becoming a permanent resident, and
right,
blah blah
right.
blah. And
But this
I
might have happened after you were like, so you were already here in 1985, right? That's when you came, July 55,
1983,
83, right?
1980,
So, but then you worked for several years. The citizenship only happened in 1990s. All through.
1993. I was a resident before that. I was a
Oh,
permanent resident before that.
because
And
sometimes,
then
yeah,
if you can't, and also this is what was really kind of ironic is that at the time, people with my knowledge of Ada were very few and far between, but the
right.
DoD had mandated that Ada be used for all kinds of defense systems. So I was
Mm-hmm.
contacted by Raytheon and Lockheed, all
Yeah,
these people saying, well, Ada, we're really looking for people like you. And I said, yeah, but I'm not a US citizen. Oh, okay.
yeah. So
But
for this,
working on NASA programs was just fine.
right. So
There were
just
no requirements. Yeah.
right. Just a quick time check. So, as you would see, we only have few minutes left now. So,
Sure.
so we'll try to, start wrapping up as we move forward. So this is interesting. So I believe that working for NASA and USC did not require any security clearances or
No.
being a citizen, and hence you were able to continue your
No.
journey there. So, you speak very good English. So did you already know English when you were in France, or did you
No.
learn it here in the US?
Well, when you work in international labs, like I did when I was in France, there's all kinds of people who show up
Mhm.
from
Right,
different backgrounds, and the common language is English. Okay.
right, right,
So I had some notion, but I lived. I mean, starting July 5th, 1983, I had not only to work but live in an Anglophone country. And what I did, something that I can share with you is I
yeah,
watch as much TV as I could.
right,
And
right.
so,
All
I mean, I was literally stuck to the TV, watching baseball, the news, shows, and because I really wanted to develop my English as quickly as possible.
right, right.
And so, and at some point in time, well, you start being bilingual, and that's
Yeah,
pretty much it. Yeah.
yeah. No, that makes sense because I think based upon what you just said, it almost seemed like that you would really embrace the US culture by
Oh
learning
yeah,
the
yeah, 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 yeah.
shows and the TVs and talking with people. So it almost became like as you're saying, native, almost similar to a native language for you, and you became bilingual.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
This is so interesting conversation that we are having, and in the interest of time, not going too further ahead, what we'll do is that maybe if you like this as well, we'll like to invite you again at some later point of time
Sure.
to continue our journey and talk further. But I want to draw certain interesting points from this conversation that we had today. So one, it's so fascinating to learn like how different countries kind of operate. Like you talked about France, where you came from a very humble background, not having too much money, but still being able to study and
Mm-hmm.
in life and go all the way to engineering and masters. And then also this requirement that the country had that you have to serve in the army or the
Yeah.
forces.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. And then you getting an opportunity to work in a very specialized atomic lab, and which is where you were headhunted by USC in the US, where
Mm-hmm.
they did your visa, you kind of moved there back, and came from all other places. You landed in LA, which is kind of dream for a lot many people to be able to do that, right? And but for USC, which is one of the foremost universities in the world, then you worked for NASA. Again, a top institution, worked on some cutting edge like ADA, Fortran, as well as several of Prolog and other kind of AI languages. that not many people in today's day and world would even know about, which you have
I
already
know.
worked in those days. So this is like a very, very inspiring and very interesting and very much
Well,
thought-provoking
you're very kind.
all across the world. But I like to leave some words for you if you had anything to say today based upon our discussion, and then we'll try to wrap it up.
I think the only thing at this point in time, and we just skimmed, my career because, I went on to do a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah, yeah,
But, I hear a lot of people, a lot of leaders saying, well, you don't really need an education because, you can succeed without one. That isn't true.
yeah.
An education is something that's so precious.
Mhm.
And if you think about it, an
Right,
education is the only thing that nobody can ever rob you from.
right, right.
It can be
So,
from money. I mean, a whole bunch of can rob you from freedom.
mhm.
But your education is up here,
Right,
and
right.
and nobody can come and say and extract it. And I think people who say, well, education, overrated. You don't know what you're talking about. Education is precious, the most precious thing in the world. Especially in my case, I didn't pay for it. It's
Absolutely.
something I got for free. So that's what I would like to leave you with.
No, this is a very good comment. I totally believe that, a lot of people keep giving examples of, Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg. They are all dropouts. By the way, I am also a dropout in my PhD in artificial intelligence. But again, I'm not proposing that that's the route that people need to take.
Mm-hmm.
I had different circumstances. I relocated to Japan at that point of time.
Oh,
So
wow, wow.
I did
Fascinating.
not. Yeah. So, I mean, maybe in the next conversation we'll talk, and I'll also share some details about myself as well. I'm pretty well traveled across the world myself. Um, so what I was just trying to say is that for people to get a structured education, especially that builds their base and foundation, so that they can apply the learnings and the knowledge in the real world, and that's what education basically sets you up with. So
Mm-hmm.
unless you are highly moneyed and you are well connected, etc., their education may not play that high a value because you already have the ecosystem, you already have the money to take those risks. And for
Absolutely.
people, that was true. They did not come from humble background. They were very well connected. They like in Bill Gates, he was pretty moneyed. His parents were like already senators and what. And same is true for other kind of like Elon Musk, if you see, or even Mark Zuckerberg, if
Yeah.
you see, all very moneyed. So if people compare with them, they don't know what they're comparing themselves against. They already had money, they had the connections and whatnot.
Yeah.
People from
Absolutely.
humble background, middle class families, etc. I think education is a great ticket to success and upward mobility. I
Mm-hmm.
think the piece that I would like for people to know. And once again, Philip, it was a pleasure talking to you today
All
here.
right.
Thanks for taking time to come into this show and talk to us and share your vast knowledge. I know we have to cover another session just to go through your experiences because you have so many of them, and it is my
Okay.
host you today here. I'll expect all the people, if they have any questions, they can post it on the channel, and we'll try to kind of respond that. And
Okay.
please like and subscribe this thing and share it among the rest of the friends. We like to invite a lot of different people who bring a lot of different experiences so that it is inspiring for the rest of the world as well. Once again, thanks.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure.
Same here. Thank you very much.
All right.